All right. Good morning, Mike Gage. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, doing really good. Looking forward to this weekend. We got the big PRCA rodeo in Butte, Montana.
You sure do. I see you got your rodeo gear on.
I do. I'm getting ready for the weekend. So everybody's always asking when I'm going to be seen in my cowboy hat. So I decided this would be the week to do it.
Yep. Well, you're definitely doing it, buddy. So I hear you're going to ride a bull tonight for your campaign.
Yeah, that's a negative.
Oh,
Not
okay.
doing that.
Yeah.
I'll be sitting in the VIP section watching the bull riders.
Mutton busting? No, not even that.
Dude, I'm like 52 years old.
It's
I'll
okay.
get hurt.
We can find a big sheep.
Yeah, well, I'd have to have A1 ambulance standby because I'd be getting hurt. That's for sure.
Well, we don't want that. We need you to be in that uniform in that office uptown. So
Yeah.
how you been, brother?
I'm doing good. Doing good. We've been a busy week, of course, and really ramping up for the final run here in the next couple of months and get this election taken care of. And we'll be out meeting and greeting everybody we can. So this is going to be a big weekend for us at the fairgrounds. And so, yeah, it's going to be fun.
Good deal, man. Well, it's we're getting close. November 5th. We need everybody that supports your campaign, our podcast, your social medias to get out there and vote November 5th. Early voting, I think, is the mid-October, I believe it is.
I believe it is.
Yep. So we need everybody to get out there and vote for Mike Gage for some change. And speaking of change, we had a guest last week. We had Dan Murphy in the studio. So it wasn't just you and me going back and forth for an hour. We had...
Yeah, it was kind of nice not having to talk. And
Yeah.
the good news is this is going to be my second week in a row where I'm not going to have to be too involved. I'm going to sit back, listen, and learn. And there's a lot of stuff going on. We do have a special guest today.
A very special guest, actually, that the listeners are going to be quite intrigued to listen to.
Yeah, in the words of the great late Paul Harvey, at the end of the day, you're going to know the rest of the story. So,
well said.
Yeah, this
Well said.
This is one that's gotten very little coverage. The county needs to know about it. The taxpayers need to know about it because they're the one that's been flipping the bill for this stuff. And
Yep.
And I've been honored to meet our guest a couple of times. I've met his wife numerous times, and they've been big supporters of us. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce our guest today, and you guys can get at it.
Yes, sir. So we have a very special guest. Most of you, or all of you, unless you live under a rock and you don't live in Butte, this gentleman here, his wife, Rhonda, had worked for the sheriff's department for a number of years, I believe 19, right?
Close to that.
Close to 19 years. And her husband, Todd, is here to basically give us a little inside scoop on what's evolving with the case, try to clear the air on a few things, or many things rather, so everybody kind of knows, their side of it. And, it's important to hear, the perspective of the victims, so to speak, in it. So without further ado, we're going to turn this over. And Todd, good morning. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, man.
I don't know about special guests, but I appreciate it.
You're a special guest to us, Todd. So tell us a little bit about what's going on. How's things? How are you? How's the family? How's Rhonda doing? How are you guys doing over the last several years of
Good.
all these things?
Obviously, it's been a struggle because it's been 4 years of basically an injustice, to be honest with you.
Right.
She was terminated in February she was put on administrative leave in February of 2020 and then ultimately terminated in September of 2020. So it's been difficult to say the least when you're unlawfully terminated and then you're forced to find another job without, the new job she had to take has no benefits. She's making minimum wage. I thought it was strange that you have to do something like that. She's went from a job where she was in a prestigious position. I believe she did investigated sex crimes on children for about 12 years.
Okay.
And a little bit about that. I mean, if you look at the national average, and I know a lot of police officers in large metro cities that were dumbfounded by the fact that she'd been able to do that many years doing that kind of work. National average, actually, if you look it up, is about 3 years, and most detectives do like 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's a tough job. That's probably one of the hardest jobs in any industry that deals with children and families of abuse, right? That's going to wear on you. Nobody really wants to do that. It's more of a calling.
Right.
And it's a special kind of detective to take that, and a special kind of person to deal with that. I know I personally would not want to go to work every day and have to unpack that type of case. But let's talk about let's go back a little bit to go beyond just her career at the towards the end before she was wrongfully terminated. I mean, unfortunately, Rhonda can't be here to do this for obvious reasons. I mean, there's still an ongoing court case, and
Correct.
and that's totally understandable. But on speaking for her behalf, how did her career start? I mean, what was the kind of let's go back a little bit. I mean, she had sounds like a remarkable career, no major issues or disciplinary problems.
Right.
She was very reliable, a good officer.
Yes.
So
I guess that's one of the biggest surprises is like I worked at this department years ago, and I guess I'm really trying to figure out how he made these decisions that he made, because a lot of these, I mean, every single person in administration was at one point in the union,
okay,
and they understand union laws and arbitration laws, and they understand the rights of officers. And then all of a sudden, they switch to the other side of the table, and then all of a sudden, none of that stuff matters anymore.
Change is pretty drastic, did it? Just like that.
I just don't understand how you can sit on the side of the union and support your officers and then make the decisions that he did later on down the road.
What point in Rhonda's career did that take place where those guys came into power and switched roles and then kind of turned their back on union structure?
To be honest with you, when the sheriff first got in, there was different captains that were in charge of the divisions, and she really had no issues. As a matter of fact, she was, I'll use the term recruited, I guess, by a captain to do detective work, and so I think she was a detective total for like 14 years.
Okay, so that's a long time.
So she had no disciplinary issues. She in her file she had nothing but awards, accolades for good work. She's won the domestic abuse officer of the year a few times. She had no problems whatsoever. And then when different people came in, all of a sudden, I don't know if it was a personal issue. I'm not really sure what happened, but all of a sudden she started being treated differently. And ultimately, for some reason, I think that resulted in her termination. Because when you have an officer that's worked as hard as she has no disciplinary issues, again, nothing but positive things in her file, and then to be terminated, it was pretty difficult.
I would imagine so. It's a long career, and it sounds like she was doing really well, and then all of a sudden, things start to deteriorate for her. Do you feel like she was targeted?
I do. I mean, again, there's so much information here. Like I could literally spend 8 or 9 hours talking to you about all the things that happened, but I can give you basically a timeline.
Sure.
So she was terminated ultimately in September of 2020. And at that point, she filed a grievance, obviously. And the union unanimously voted to go to arbitration.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to arbitration, and due to COVID, they couldn't do it until the spring of the next year. So we're into 2021. 2021, the arbitrator rules in her favor. I believe it was August 8th. It was arbitrator McCoy, and he was an arbitrator that was agreed to do the arbitration between the county and with the union.
Okay.
So both sides signed a binding arbitration agreement to have the arbitrator conduct the case, and then
the arbitrator, so they're bound. So whatever the arbitrator's decision is, that's supposed to be final, correct?
right.
Okay.
I mean, that's binding is a definitive word. So it's supposed to, that means
That typically ends the case. I mean, whenever I've been involved in mediations before,
So both sides.
it ends the process.
Right.
Usually is the agreement. It avoids having to have a judge and a jury.
I guess that's some of the reasons why it's so upsetting is that they both signed an agreement, a contract between the two that said they'll agree to what the arbitrator decides. And so the arbitrator ultimately sent down a 14-page decision, and he said that she will be immediately reinstated and she'll get all of her back pay, all of her benefits back, and she'll get the choice of her positions. And they opted not to do that.
I mean, how often, I wonder, does that occur where they tell the arbitrator to stick it? This isn't what we're going to do. I mean, usually when you have a ruling and it's signed, and then the judge is the arbitrator is not the judge. The judge still has to sign off on what the arbitration results were, determinations. So, I mean, how often does that happen where, the judge makes a determination? This is what you have to do. You have to pay, the plaintiff X amount of money. You got to reinstate this. You got to do that. And then they said, no, Pax in. I mean, how does that even come to that?
Right. Well, the judge
There's a rule of law for a reason.
What they should have done was immediately done a confirmation of the arbitration. But what ended up happening was the attorney for the union knew that the county was going to fight this. They were trying to vacate the award. And if you look up the statistics on that, it's like binding arbitration it's got very strict federal laws. Mm-hmm. So there was, I think it's 1 in 10,000 people get an overturn from an arbitrator. And just because there's so many federal laws on it.
So where are we at now with this thing? I mean, what's the next step? Because it sounds like it's pretty much up in the air again. Right. I mean, you haven't been compensated yet. And
in part.
In part, so okay.
What ended up happening was the arbitrator ruled in her favor. The county tried to vacate it based off a law, which they feel that Rhonda wasn't, they felt that she didn't follow this law, basically. Mm-hmm. And I disagree with that also, and so did the court later on, because that law talks about initial hires, not senior hires. It's when you're initially hired. And the arbitrator actually spoke about this in his ruling, that this law does not apply there. And yet the county still tried to go forward with it, which, again, I don't understand. I'm in all over it still. Because,
well, I mean, I know it's tough. You've been dealing with it for 4 years, and it's probably one of those things where it's like, when is it going to end so we can get on with our life? I mean, it's life altering. It sucks the joy out of anything that you look forward to in life. Even probably the holidays aren't the same because you just have this gorilla in the room. But let's talk about, because a lot of this is already public knowledge. It's available online and through the depositions that have been posted, right? So we can talk about things that are already talked about in court. Tell us how the termination came about. Kind of bring a conclusion there, so everybody listening can know. Like, she was a great officer, detective, had a really tough job with child sex crimes, and then all of a sudden, the wheels started coming off the bus.
Right.
Talk us through that process and what happened.
Well, basically, she was doing, in some cases, 2 to 3 times more caseload. Mm-hmm. Her caseload was horrendous. And there was times where, I mean, you can look up the numbers, but there was times where she's doing 2 or 3 times the amount that other detectives were doing. And so when she talked to me about this originally, I said, well, why don't you go to your captain and talk to him about it and just tell him you're being overwhelmed, because she was talking about going back to the patrol division. And I was like, that's really what you want to do. But like with detectives, they work 410s, they can't get the weekends, they have the option to work holidays. I went back and forth with it. So she went to her first captain, and he basically told her, well, the reason that you are getting so many more cases than everybody else is because you do such a great job. So she came back, and I was like, well, that doesn't solve the problem. That just...
I'm sure she did a great job. It also makes me wonder, does that also mean she does a lot of the work for us so we don't have to? Right. It's like throwing another brick on the back, keep going.
But then the next, he leaves, next captain comes in, and all of a sudden there's issues. So I don't know if it was a personal vendetta or what was going on there, but all of a sudden she's now having problems. So she actually starts getting followed around by this captain. Mm-hmm. And she caught him several times actually following her. And then he tried to write her up for a sick day. He didn't feel that she followed the guidelines for sick day. So I read it and I was like, you've done nothing wrong here. You can take a sick day for really any reason.
Was this the captain? I did read some of the deposition. It's a lot, but I did get some information. Was this the captain that had, at one point some years ago, had romantic intentions or asked her out on a date or something
I
like
believe
that?
so, yeah.
Okay, same guy. Later, years later, sometime later, he now is her superior officer, and then he starts what you were saying. He's following her. He's kind of giving a little mid-range harassment. And now he's complaining about her a use of sick time, right?
Right.
So same guy. Okay.
So anyway, she talks to me about it, and I said, well, what he's doing here is completely wrong. Not just the following you around, but why would he do that? Does he do it with other officers? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So, but the thing he's trying to write you up for at the moment about the sick time is wrong because you didn't violate any policy.
Mm-hmm.
You can call off for to meet a family member. How does he know I didn't have a doctor's appointment? So on and so forth. So basically what had happened was we went to Three Bears and I bought some beer. She got her prescription. We got a few things at the grocery store. I don't even know why she called up sick, honestly. It's been so long ago. So we leave, and then she gets called in the office like 2 days later and said she must use her sick time.
Mm-hmm.
So I said what I would do is I'd talk to him about it, and if he doesn't withdraw that, then I would file an HR complaint.
Mm-hmm.
One, for following you around, and two, because he's writing you up for no reason, honestly.
Did she, speaking of the sick time, did she prior to that use a lot of sick time?
I don't think so.
I mean, it's yours to burn, right? So if you feel like, you don't feel well or you're not going to perform well that day, I mean, but at the same time, there was no like constant calling out or anything. She was very reliable.
Right. And yeah.
Do they not allow like you to take sick time for, let's just say, a mental health day?
Yeah, mental health.
I mean, just to get away and
right. And they should be able to do that. I don't know what the specifics were, but I basically told her if he doesn't withdraw it to file an HR complaint.
Okay.
But this time, I don't want to get into like a lot of personal matters, but Rhonda was going through a difficult time. She had some issues with family, like cancer. Her dad had got diagnosed and died. Her stepmom had some other medical issues. There was a lot of things going on with her at the time, so it didn't really help. But
yeah, no, it certainly sounds like that would be a lot to pile up at once.
So she files the HR complaint and then decides that she wants to withdraw it because she felt she was going to be retaliated against. As a matter of fact, we were driving to Boulder, and she's like, I really think I get fired if I file this. I'm like, that's preposterous. Like, you can't get fired for filing an HR complaint. It's like, you're right.
Right.
And you tried to be an adult. You talked to these people up front and tried to address it, and they didn't want to do it. So I would follow through with the complaint. And she opted to withdraw it.
So let's talk about the what was the outcome of that advancement that her commanding officer made some years back when he asked her out. What did she say to him? Did they have a relationship? Was this?
I don't believe so. That was before my time. She said there was nothing there. She told him no, I guess.
Okay.
So I'm not really sure if those correlate.
How long after that did this? After she said no, I don't have feelings for you that way, or whatever she said. How long after that did some of his harassment begin? Was it?
I'm not really sure, honestly, because she was an officer then, and he was, I think, an officer or detective, maybe a sergeant.
Okay.
So it wasn't really until he kind of moved up through the ranks and then had the ability to supervise her, I guess.
Is he still there or is he gone?
I believe he's gone. Okay.
Okay, he is gone. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, that does sound like he was vindictive, maybe, from the rejection.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like it was several years. If she was a detective for 14 years.
Right.
That sounds like
division later. So.
It sounds like he really, potentially held a grudge there for quite a while.
Like it, right.
He might have, and I'm just, again, it's speculation. I mean, if that's absolutely, the case, he, he's not there anymore for a reason. Maybe he retired, but maybe he had some underlying issues, because I mean, that's a long time to hold on to a grudge,
right,
in my opinion.
No, I agree. But anyway, so she goes on and I'll back up. She got terminated, go through the arbitration. They try to vacate it. That goes into district court. They lose their request to vacate through Judge Whalen.
Okay.
He says it's got to go back to the arbitrator. So during all this, I was like, we need to get an attorney because obviously there's a lot of things going on here that we need to get some legal counsel for. So we hired an attorney in Bozeman. And again, her and I sat in his office for probably 3 hours. And by the time I told him everything that was going on, it was like, they looked at me like a huckster in a wristwatch. Like nobody even knew what to say. It was like, people don't really know what went on like this whole time. And it is really difficult because you don't, all the things that she missed out on, with their grandkids, the kids, things she can't go to anymore, working nights, not having holidays off, not, all the things that we enjoyed before came to a halt. Because I don't know if you know this, but by state law, she's also required to work while this is all going on, which
Back here, so unpack that for me a little bit. So she, by state law, has to have dutiful employment right now while this case is going on?
right. And so 4 years and it's crazy. I had to look it up because I don't believe it, but the fact is that you're required to do that to reduce the amount that they have to pay you at the end.
Really?
Arbitration, which is, it sounds ridiculous, but
Because it is ridiculous.
So we've had
technically.
4 years of our life upended. We can't do all the things we used to do. I mean, being a senior detective, she'd had first choice at vacation.
Right.
She could work holidays if she wanted to, opt to. I mean, they made a good wage, and since she's left, that wage has gone up considerably. So she's missed out on that. She's missed out on
Yeah,
promotional opportunities.
sure.
So basically, what it is right now is after Judge Whalen sent it back to the arbitrator, it was the right thing to do because it's, again, there's federal case law on this and it's binding arbitration. So he sent it back to the arbitrator, and now the county has appealed that again to the Supreme Court.
So 4 years, a couple appeals, several attempts at arbitration. Now you're headed for an appellate court to be heard for the Supreme Court, right?
Right. Well, the Supreme Court's just a hearing.
Right.
So they're going to determine that. And it's, again, this is insanity that they're spending this money. I don't understand.
That's where I was getting at with
Person
that, is how much do you think, or has your attorney said that the county has spent of taxpayers' dollars on the department and the administration's seemingly, hollow fight here against
Right.
you and your wife,
Well,
Rhonda?
it's well over $1 million right now.
Jesus Christ.
And
Okay.
I'll get into why that is. Well, it's supposed to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's supposed to have a hearing. And my understanding is it's supposed to be 45 minutes for each side. And this is the kind of stuff that I'd like to get out there, is the fact that the county is fighting this, yet the people that, again, I talked about the administrators being in union and understanding the laws, and their labor attorneys that they have, one of them's got decades of experience in labor law.
Mhm.
So they're asking, and they're spending the money to go to the Supreme Court and ask them to overturn a decision that's already case law that they just decided on 5 years ago.
Mhm.
It was a case in Livingston. And they're spending all this money to fight something they know they're going to lose. And so I beat my head against the wall. I've been for 4 years trying to figure out what she did that was so egregious that they're going to fight and spend this much money on not letting her return to work after they've been ordered to by an arbitrator. It's
Did the judge sign that binding arbitration for her to return to work, or did he kick the can down the road and kind of punt to another arbitrator?
No, there's a difference between the arbitrator. With arbitration, both sides sign a contract,
Mhm.
and I think there's 6 or 7 arbitrators you can choose from, and you go back and forth
Right.
until you both choose one. And then each side signs a contract that says they will abide by the arbitrator's decision.
Okay.
So this is federal case law.
So what did the administration do to thwart that off and not let her return to work? Did they file an appeal on
They filed an appeal. They wanted the arbitration to be vacated.
Okay, so they asked for that to be vacated and then start again.
Right.
Okay. In the meantime, she can return to work once they filed that, right?
Well, yeah, but they were ordered to bring her back to work, which is crazy.
Right. Yeah, but
They
see,
didn't do
so if they don't follow the arbitration's order, if you don't follow a judge's order, you're often held in contempt for that, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, how did they keep her from returning to work? Did they simply say don't come back?
They just keep appealing.
They just keep
They
appealing,
just
right?
keep using the money, and they keep appealing. So now,
And that's at the expense of the
The
citizens
taxpayers,
of Butte and
right.
Silver Bow County.
for a person that hasn't done anything wrong,
Right.
is what's
It's
the most.
a taxpayer funded witch hunt. That's what it sounds like.
So it was supposed to be last month. Union asked for a 30-day extension, and he wrote his brief. I read it. It's absolutely outstanding, actually. And they will be, I guess it's supposed to be this month. It was supposed to be 30 days for sometime in July. We don't exactly have a date, but it's insanity that they think, and again, with their skill level and their education they have, to think that the Supreme Court's going to overrule the decision that he just ruled on. And they actually used that case law from Officer in Livingston, and they try to make it apples to apples, and it's not. It's apples to oranges completely.
So what's going to happen next? So let's say the Supreme Court hears this case sometime this month. We're assuming, right towards the end of this month, and the Supreme Court sends it back to the arbitrator, or rules that the arbitrator's decision is in good standing. Then we've spent all this money, and the end result would they say that they have to bring her back to work?
Right. So the Supreme Court will do a hearing, and they'll determine whether they're even going to go to trial on this or not. And my assumption is they're not, because they just ruled on it. So again, the county's wasting money on this, but the Supreme Court will then, if they said there's nothing to go to trial on this, as far as I know, there's no more appeal process at that point. So she'll have the option of, well, I take that back. I digress. It'll go to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator will make the decision on whether she can return to work still, which is what he ordered, and then all of her back pay, all of her benefits. And so, this is going to come about like in the fall. They're going to have to pay all of her back pay, all the benefits, all the other things that they have neglected to do for 4.5 years.
Do we have any idea what the total amount as of right now that the county or the taxpayers are going to be paying her if that decision goes that way?
I do. Actually, I've done 3 different sheets on it. And so I don't speak. Fact is, the arbitrator is going to have to make the decision, because there's a lot of other aspects that go into this. One is that she missed out on promotional opportunities, and they didn't follow his order the first time. So, like, even the county's council has said, well, if it goes back to arbitrator, like, he's not going to change his mind. And I'm like, I realize that, so I don't understand why you guys are fighting it. So it's going to be, like, to answer your question about the numbers, if they give her all of her back pay, she missed out on the drop program, deferred comp, like insurance, all of her other benefits, just a detective pay, they're going to owe about $900,000. And if she gets promoted, which is what I'm asking for, if we do a mediation, or when we go back with the arbitrator, if she gets promoted, it would be about $1.3 million.
So based on I do have some knowledge on the promotions there. So she would be, technically in the last 4 years, she would definitely, are you looking at lieutenant, or are you looking at she possibly, because aren't a lot of those people now captains? Or
right, I'm asking, like, honestly, since they're pushing this so far, I'm asking for lieutenant detective pay. I think it's only fair. She was a senior detective. She leaves. Everybody in the detective department that I'm aware of have been promoted by 1 or 2 ranks, at least 2 ranks. I'm sorry, at least 1 rank, in some cases 2. So I don't know. I think a reasonable person, and if it goes back to the arbitrator, I think a reasonable person would assume that she's entitled to that because she never had the opportunity.
Well, obviously, I do have a lot of people on the inside that feed me information, and I've heard that there's several people that in the administration that said if they order her back to work, that they're going to resign immediately because they're not going to work with her. And so it seems like that retaliation or that same mindset is still there. That, well, if they put her back here, I'm going to quit. Well, you guys didn't have anything to do with the original case anyway, and now they don't want her back. And I've said, and I've told this to Rhonda, if I were in her shoes, I'd go back to work and I'd kick my foot up on the desk, and I'd come in every day and put my feet up on the desk and I'd taunt them, because they've done nothing but ruin her life for the last 4 years, and intentionally, even though they've been told by the arbitrator, put her back to work, the court said put her back to work. Now it's at the Supreme Court, and if they come back and say put her back to work, you know, I know she probably has some mixed feelings about whether she wants to go back and do that and work for those people again. But boy, I would in a heartbeat. And
why not?
I mean, they've ruined her life, you know. But she's not the type of person that would do that. If she went back in, I know she'd throw her whole heart into it and handle.
That was the conversation Todd and I had. Is she's not vindictive like that?
And she has every right to be. I mean, the whole family has every right to be after what's been done to her.
Oh yeah.
And you know, she'd probably go back, and you know, and I'd welcome her back too. So you know, I've not heard anything negative from the officers about anything that she ever did at work. So she deserves, you know, and maybe she won't come back, but she deserves the money that they owe her, and to be able to get on with her life and have this not hanging on her head. So hopefully within the next month or so, we get this situation behind us. But I think a lot of people in Butte-Silver Bow believe this case has run its course, and it's been taken care of a long time ago. And what they haven't realized is, no, the county's still spending money on this.
Yep.
They've already lost the $300,000 that was awarded in federal court back earlier this year.
Right.
And that doesn't even cover, you know, what's going on in the Supreme Court right now.
Oh, that's and
if you look
super
at
expensive there.
It makes me wonder, you've got a case this big, and the news cycle on it should be an ongoing thing on, you know, what is taking place
Updates,
here.
right.
And all we got was this little headline. I'm not even sure it was the front page headline, but it was on Facebook. It was posted and never reposted again, where the federal court issued a ruling on the $350,000 or $360,000, $349,000 that she was awarded. And we're told it's insurance payments, but I know for a fact that check came from the county to Rhonda, and it was signed by the county executive. That's not how an insurance payment typically works. That's how a payout from within the county works. And, you know, if you got that money, the insurance company, if it is normally going to write the check directly to the victim,
right.
And it's gonna come from them. So it appears like they're
trying to keep it out of the public eye.
Yeah, they're trying to keep it, and they're trying to keep their. I'm sure the insurance company has said, we got a problem here, and you guys are looking at getting canceled, you know, if we keep making these payouts on this case. So sometimes it's smarter to pay it directly than to lose your insurance.
It would have been cheaper for them to pay it, cheaper for taxpayers. And obviously they're using that as their vindictive and targeting, you know.
Well, part of that
Rhonda.
Actually, I mean, you said it, as far as the administrators saying, well, just leave, or people up there saying or leave. That shows not only, like, it's childish, honestly, and it's unprofessional.
Yeah, but I think
when you're in a leadership position, you don't do that.
I hope she goes back just to preliminarily drain the swamp before Mike takes over.
I would. The fact of the matter is, once it goes back to the arbitrator, I don't know how it will rule, and the arbitrator can say, you know, it's been too long. I don't feel comfortable putting you back in that environment. He could do a lot of things, but I think she'll have the option to.
Yeah, well, it's no different than those crybabies that say, "Oh, if so and so's elected president, I'm moving to Zimbabwe," or you know, Bangladesh, India. I mean, it's like, look, I mean, you don't have to always like who your president is, and you don't always have to like who you work with, but you got to be adults about it and go to work.
And that's been the problem here, and they're not adults,
right?
And they're not leaders, because a leader looks at the whole picture.
Right.
They make a good decision based off that, whether they like the person, they don't like the person. Good leadership does the same thing every time for everybody.
Correct.
And in this case, they don't even have a reason why they terminated her other than a fitness for duty. And with that, like the sheriff testified to, and it's in his deposition, that he would have not terminated her if it wasn't for the fitness for duty.
He would have not terminated. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so, I mean, what else? What could he have terminated her for?
Right.
Obviously, but they don't even understand like progressive discipline. Like, you terminate her for fitness for duty.
Yeah, but was she offered any counseling, help, time off?
Right.
I mean, again, you can't just fire somebody because they've gone through things in the job that made them shaky.
Can they not? It's in the collective bargaining agreement.
Right. That was in the next point. Is
like Section 5, I think, but it says that, you know, do what they can and work with people that have any issues because, well, I got a copy of it. I can read it to you, but they're basically, they were supposed to help her in every way. And instead what they did was they terminated her, and they terminated her. I mean, I didn't get into it, but they went into something else. But basically once she had those issues with the captain, and then pretty soon, like, she was told to take, again, like, I'm going all over the place because there's so many things.
I know there's a lot to talk about. I'm sure.
But with fitness for duty, like when we went to trial on that, we had an expert witness. His name's Dr. Michelotti, and he sees 200 police officers a month. That's what he specializes in. He's been doing it for like 30 years. He's got 8 other psychologists that work with him. And we talked to him about it. He's like, well, first of all, the doctor that you saw wasn't credited. He's not certified for this.
So I was going to ask you, was
initial hires.
The one that the county hired, was he was not certified with, like,
and he admitted it in his deposition.
No PTSD or
he also conducted the test incorrectly.
Okay.
And so while they're continuing on with this false narrative, that's what eludes me, because everything has been against them on this, and they're still continuing to push forward and spend the money, even knowing that their doctor that they sent her to wasn't qualified, that he had done the test incorrectly by his deposition and in court. And like our expert said, if you fired every single police officer, first responder that went to a fitness for duty, you'd lose 95% of your.
You'd have nobody.
People,
you'd have two
because
people.
everybody's gone to a critical incident, and when you do crimes like she did, or investigated crimes like she did, then it's going to take its toll on you after a while.
Of course.
Is there any truth to the rumor that's out there? And I some people have said it is true. I obviously don't have any personal knowledge, but I hear it often that the sheriff spoke directly to the doctor and told them what to say or what to ask. Is there any truth to that?
Right. And that's like one of the parts I was going to talk about is what the federal trial. And there's evidence, and they deny it still, even though it was put up in front of a jury. And I've read them, I've seen them. There's been emails that went back and forth, and they can call it an inference or whatever you want to, but there's text messages and emails that went back and forth. There were several different redactions from the doctor.
Hold on one. So there was text messages from who to who?
Administrators to the doctor.
No kidding.
Impartial, can't see me, but quote unquote impartial doctor.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I did. I'm not a moron either, and I did get a good night's rest. So something tells me you shouldn't be texting the doctor that evaluated the plaintiff if you are the one who hired them. I mean, was there coaching involved? Was there,
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and there's evidence backing that up.
And it's in writing. They continue to say, well, that wasn't the case, but unless you've got an IQ lower than a thermostat reading,
right,
then it looks like collusion to me.
Okay. I mean, is that something that's going to be addressed as soon as the
we filed a lawsuit
suspicion of collusion? Okay. Yeah, because that's
for malpractice.
Well, I mean, it's also the administration.
He committed several HIPAA laws.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's people going to get fired, potentially prosecuted. You can't. Yeah, that's tampering with the case and the witnesses and the doctor being an expert witness.
I just don't see how. I don't understand why they're taking this so far. I just don't understand what she's done. It's so egregious. They've lost the arbitration. They lost the vacate of their arbitration. They're going to lose the Supreme Court arbitration. I'm confident in that. And they lost the federal case, the federal trial that we went to.
Yeah.
And she was found to be retaliated against unanimously by a jury of her peers. And I'm going to do a little side note on that too. I found it strange that the county didn't want anybody from Butte on the jury.
Okay.
I thought that was kind of strange.
Did they give a reason for that? I mean,
no,
because it's you're by constitutional law, you're supposed to be heard by a jury of your peers. Her peers would be people in Butte and Silver Bow County.
Federal courts, they bring from all over the community. I just thought it was weird they got pushed back for people from Butte.
Okay.
I just thought that was strange.
But she still won.
She won.
So then they paid that, and they were going to try and fight that as well. And we brought up some other things to them that if they pursued that, then I was going to pursue other avenues legally, and they opted not to appeal it.
So Todd, you worked for the department for a number of years as well, Butte-Silver Bow Police
Right.
Department. Should be Sheriff's Department. I mean,
Well, it's changed.
I know the Sheriff Police Department. We'll work that out later. But anyway, now so you worked there for a number of years. How many years did you work there?
I think it was 11.
Okay. And what was your rank and some of
I
your
was just
other
an officer.
Okay.
I was on the SWAT team. I was a field training officer. There's not a lot of lateral movement there, honestly.
Yeah.
There wasn't then. I don't know.
and you worked for the union. You were
Right. I was the president for
president of
a
the
while.
union, right?
I took an interest in the union right away, the board and
Yeah.
different positions.
So with that, that's a pretty political position. You definitely get to know everybody because you're the union president. You're representing them through collective bargaining, and would you say that there was any type of boys network?
Oh yeah.
Where there were certain officers that really
Clerks.
clicked together, administrators, and they just looked out for each other and anybody on the outside of that circle. Did you see anything like that there?
Absolutely. Many times.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, when I was the president, I asked, and I still think to this day, I don't understand why administrators sit on the other side of the table from the union. It's difficult for me to understand because it's a morale issue.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm looking at the other side and you're fighting me for raises, you're fighting me for better equipment, all the things that you fight for in your contract. Why are you arguing that against me when we could be working together as a team
Right.
and moving forward with this and working as a department? Because you're there for the community ultimately. And in my mind, you don't do that. Like, you should work with your officers. Like, I hope when Mike gets elected that he sits on that side of the table. It's like, you guys want to give me 4%. I want my guys to have 6%. And that increases morale. And when you fight for your people, they want to work for you. And that leads into good morale.
Well, we've already talked about many times how the morale is in the toilet right now and has been for a number of years.
Well, it has.
I'm sure plenty of good officers that work there are looking forward to a morale and regime change there.
Right, absolutely. But you can't do that when you sit on opposite sides.
Well, you can't do that when you are despondent and not really structured as a leadership role of administrators. Basically they've all sounds like are reactive and not proactive. So they're just good at putting fires out or trying to. And certainly Rhonda's case is quite a fire. Was she part or accepted by that clique that you talked about?
No.
She was on the outside.
And this all, when it really started getting bad is when she finally opted to file an HR complaint. And that's when everything started
What the shit?
burning in, basically. So I don't really have like the exact dates or anything. I don't know if it really matters. But once she started getting to the point where she needed to do something, I advised her. I was like, what I would do is be an adult. Lester has an open door policy. Go talk to him. So she did that. And then, of course, she got ridiculed by the captain for not following her chain of command, which is ridiculous because then it wouldn't be an open door policy for long. And
if the issue's with her direct commanding officer, she can't go to him. Hey, I don't like you. You're being mean.
Which is the exact definition of the chain of command. Like if you're not happy with him, his next person is the sheriff. So
right. It's ridiculous.
On that, but
well, obviously he's vindictive. It's the same. This is the same individual we spoke about a little while ago about harassing and having a workplace motions towards her. Asking her out before. So I mean, it's the same guy that she can't go to and say, hey, I feel uncomfortable. I feel that you're targeting me. I need to talk to the sheriff. I mean, he's not going to escalate. That's just, and there's bylaws against that anyway.
Oh,
she's supposed to bypass him and go to the next level.
So I just thought it's ridiculous how to put it out there because they don't understand the chain of command is. They said they violated it and can't have an open door policy. So she tried to talk to him about it, and he's like, well, she said, I might just have to go back to patrol. This is just overwhelming for me. I can't keep up on my caseload. You guys keep adding stuff. So when she complained, it just got worse and worse and worse. She started getting tampons put in her box. People stopped talking to her. The sheriff says, let's go out for a ride. Like everybody thinks about this every once in a while about, leaving detectives. We've all been through this before. So she's like, I just can't function in this environment. And so the sheriff took that upon himself to use that quote to send her for fitness for duty. So he knew something was wrong, or in his mind there was something wrong. And then I didn't understand why the doctor wrote what he did and whatever, everything was going on at the time. I'm like, this is, it's insanity. I don't know other word to use for it. But then as we started getting discovery and we started getting, and not all of it, by the way, left a lot out, and phones were lost and couldn't be, everybody lost their phone.
It was convenient that certain things were no longer accessible.
So I didn't really understand everything until before we did in trial and saw discovery and saw testimony. Then I understood that there was collusion there in my mind, because the things that the administrators wrote and the things that the doctors wrote like meshed conveniently.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this entire thing has gone too far, and the longer that the county and administrators drag this out, the more corrupt it looks. I mean, they should have just settled this shit a long time ago, and they just look worse and worse as it drags on.
Well, the other thing is for the fitness for duty, like she went out with the union representative, the president, actually, I believe at the time, and they're like, when she was going to get terminated, and they're like, well, why don't we do a second opinion?
Right.
And he's like, nope, no second opinion. I'm like, so you're taking the life of a life career, I guess, of 19-year veteran, and you don't even have the respect to find another doctor and make sure that you're making the right decision here. Because I've heard from him and a few other idiots up there that this is like, it's been the toughest 4 years of their lives. And that actually makes me sick. It's like, you still have a job. You made these decisions. You made these terrible decisions.
Right.
And now it's coming back on you. And instead of being an adult and being a supervisor in a leadership position and stepping up and saying, you know what, I'm going to put everybody in a room. I was wrong. Clean the slate, move forward. We're digging our heels in further.
Right.
And so, like, nobody's asked for fitness for duty. Everybody keeps saying fitness for duty, fitness for duty. I'm like, well, then send her for a fitness for duty. And the Judge Whalen asks that of the county, why did you do another fitness for duty? And they don't have any responses. And I'll tell you why that is. It's because they know that she is fit for duty now. And I'll tell you why. She, one of the arbitrator's orders was that the county was to find any rehabilitation necessary to help her out if indeed she needed help.
Right.
But he never put anything in his order that she needed a fitness for duty. So the county didn't do anything else other than this one thing. And what they did was they sent her to a doctor, and was Dr. Patnott, who also testified, and this is probably court record now, so it should be public knowledge. So they said, well, you're going to go see this doctor and see if there's any rehabilitation strategies necessary. So I kind of pushed back on it because I knew what they were doing. And I thought, well, they're going to use this. They're going to hire this guy. They're going to do the same thing with the other guy, the other doctor. And they're going to basically confirm their, again, quote, impartial doctor. So I was like, well, we'll go over to it. The attorney's advised to go. So I drove over to Missoula. I thought, well, where's his office? And it turns out he does have an office there. However, she was required to go to the opposing counsel's law office to do this interview. And like, so this guy's impartial. Everybody, like, I keep hearing that word impartial, yet you're sending to a doctor you're choosing. She has no say. She can't hire her own doctor. She can't go to any doctor of her choosing. She doesn't have to say who this is. So we go to the opposing counsel's law office. I'm like, well, this is strange. Why don't we go to his office? So anyway, she goes in, and this is hearsay, obviously, but she tells me, she walks in there, and he's like, you know who I am? Introduces himself. He's like, I'm not here for you. I'm not your friend. I'm hired by Butte-Silver Bow. Do you know why you're here? And she's like, well, I think of fitness for duty. And he said, no, it's not fitness for duty. I'm here to see if I can rehabilitate you in any way. So they conduct some tests. I think there was a oral interview and like her oral questions and like in writing the test. So we leave, and she's like, well, that was kind of awkward. And she tells me, she's like, the funny thing is I filed 3 different counts, sexual harassment, retaliation, these different claims, and it's in court right now. And this doctor tells me, well, you're a pretty woman. I understand why you're having problems there. I'm like, what doctor says that?
No shit. You can't make this up.
No. So I'm like, okay. So we wait for months, and we get the results from this test, but he doesn't want to reveal everything. He just wants to reveal that he just writes his narrative, basically. And I thought there's something suspicious here. So I talked to Rhonda's attorney, and he said, well, why aren't they giving us the results back? And I was like, I know why. Because she's probably found to be what the normal range is, and they don't want to tell you that. So we had to subpoena it through federal court to get his findings. And sure enough, she came back with the normal ranges that fits what they fired her for to begin with. So she didn't follow this law. And I can give you the laws if you want to, but it's basically like the mental health. You have to be mentally and physically able to perform.
There's parameters that they have
to. But of course, that law is, again, for initial hires.
Right.
So I'm like, well, isn't this convenient that they didn't want to admit this? And part of that, they also tried to keep him from testifying because they took him off their witness list. But he was on our witness list, so we were able to talk to him about it, and it's in the court documents now. So these are the kind of things that they're doing and continue to do and continue to spend money on.
It's a shit show, man, because if they just would, you can avoid all this expenses to the taxpayers, frustration to, you and your family, your wife, Rhonda, if you just deal with people right down the middle of the road, just fairly. And people will allow you to manage them the way that they want to be treated. And if you just treat them fairly, if they screw up, you have to put in disciplinary procedures. And if it continues to happen, you have to make tough choices from there. But if they don't, or they need help, just deal with them fairly, and you avoid millions of dollars in litigation, bad publicity, stress to other, your officers. I mean, there's so many ways you can avoid this shit show.
Well, how about trying to help her out?
Right. So I mean, you offer help.
Many officers in that department. I've been like, I'm not going to get into names and stuff, but like there was guys that their kids committed suicide, and there was some. I was there. I went to it, but and understandably, they, I worked shifts for them. Like I worked my days off.
You tried to help them out,
and other,
like, as you should.
Not just me. A lot of officers did, but they ended up putting them on administrative leave with pay. And they did this with several other officers. So I'm like, so you did this with other people. So what has Rhonda's done that's so bad that you can't do that for her? Why can't you put her on light duty or, get her some counseling until she can get back? Because like I said, she was going through a difficult time with her stepmom, her dad dying. Honestly, this caused a separation between us for a while because I'd go one direction with some things, and I'll just say she's nicer than I am with a lot of things. So it caused some issues. And so when you have a person that's investigating sex crimes on children, you're going through all these personal issues at home. Maybe she wasn't at the time because she admitted to the doctor at one point. She's like, I can't work like this. This is difficult for me. And then one of my questions at that time was, so you're saying she could never, because this is one of the things that their doctor that they hired and colluded with, honestly, said is like, nope, she cannot be fixed ever. I'm like, that's weird for a psychologist to say that, considering that's your job. So then it turns out that down the road, this goes on for months, and then we see this other psychologist who's, in my opinion, 10 times better than the first one. He at least seemed to try to do his job. And he, basically found that she was within normal ranges. And so that means to me she could return to work, but the county refuses to do the fitness for duty to prove that she can.
At the very least, when you look at it from a political and economical perspective of running a town, a government, a township, you got 19 years invested in your employee, a lot of training, a lot of expenses. You spent a lot of money grooming and teaching and nurturing her growth as an officer, as a detective for 19 years. So they're valuable to you.
Right.
They're very valuable. You don't just cancel them like a stamp and next. You want to try to help them, right? You want to try to repair them and get them back to work, right? So they can get back to a normal baseline in their life.
Right.
And that's just weird to me that they're like, yeah, you're very invaluable to my department, but you're broken, you're fired.
Right.
And it's not like she got broken on her own time. We'll call it broken, but it's, PTSD probably from dealing with 130 cases of child sex abuse.
Well, she passed the psychological when she entered.
Right. So obviously her baseline is she started with a healthier baseline, mentally, and then that wore her down. I mean, you shouldn't, it's a shit show, and they should have reached out and said, hey, let's put you on a desk and get you some help and get you squared away, and then we'll reevaluate what direction you want to take this down the road. Not you're fired.
Well, one of their that doctor that they hired to do this, he said some of those things. And it's crazy to me that he's under the understanding that a person who just started as a police officer, like at 20 years old, say, has the same views on life than a 20-year veteran.
Right.
He said that. I'm like, that's like, I could talk to third grader, and they would realize that's not the case because a person's seen all these things that as first responders see for all these years.
Right.
And then for a doctor to say, oh no, it's the same thing.
Right.
And he's supposed to be, a specialist.
It's a similar responsibility that the military performs with their soldiers, right? They go to war, they come back, they have problems.
Right.
They own that for the rest of that soldier's life. They get health care, they get mental health counseling,
right.
and they don't get discarded. There was a time where that used to happen post-Vietnam, but they've since uprighted that. This is no different. She obtained these issues from the job. They owe her that much to help see her through that.
Right. And I'd say even allegedly at this point, because I feel they told him what to say.
Right.
And this isn't the first time, just so you know. There's other officers and that have left for mental health reasons and asked for help, and it's been denied. I know one officer, that resigned due to mental health reasons and asked for help, and they basically told them, well, if you want help, we'll get it for you, but you have to stay. You have to stay here as an officer to get it. Otherwise, we're not going to help you out. And so there's what people probably don't realize. I know we've discussed it so many times is, again, the human brain is meant to see 1 to 3 horrific events in a lifetime that it can heal from. And there's officers that see this, that they exceed that limit in a week.
Right.
And so their brain starts to change and how it reacts. And you have to have a mental health program. You got to be able to have mental health days. Because, and again, we keep discussing this, is if people go online, you can see the amount of officers who take their own lives every year. And that number is growing every single year because of the stresses of the job, because of the things that they're seeing. There is a mental health problem in not just in law enforcement, but for first responders everywhere. And you got to have a program. First off, you have to understand it's going to happen. It's going to happen in your department. You're going to have officers who suffer mental health, and you have to look at it. It's no different than being physically sick.
Right.
You get sick, you take days off to go to the doctor. You go see the doctor, you get a prescription, you get better after a week, and you come back to work. Well, it's the same thing. There's nothing wrong with mental health. It's again, that's saying it's okay to not be okay. You're going to see things, and you're going to get depressed. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have the PTSD. You have to realize that, and you got to get a program in place so when that does happen, those officers get the help that they need, and then can return to duty. And if it takes a week off for them, or if it takes 2 weeks off, that's still a lot cheaper than getting rid of the officer. And we'll say they need a month off.
Right.
It's still cheaper to get them the medical help that they need to help them recover than it is to lose that officer, lose that experience, to lose all that training, and hire a new officer. So again, like we've said, we're going to have a mental health program to deal with this, because what happened to Rhonda is not unique in law enforcement. It's commonplace. And the old days of probably when I was there, when Todd was an officer, you just kind of man up and go on with life and don't deal with it, doesn't work anymore. Because now, even from when I was an officer back in the 90s and early 2000s, we'd see these traumatic events, but they're happening so much more frequently now.
Yeah, certainly are.
Maybe we'd see one a week or one every couple of weeks. And I mean, now they're seeing these things daily. And you got to have a program in place. And again, we have money to do these programs. There's money to be found. We're looking at, Todd had told me earlier this week or last week, that there was some comp time being submitted by exempt employees that are salaried employees that is pretty remarkable. I mean, there's enough money there to hire new officers, to get equipment. I mean, all these things that I'm finding, we don't have to ask for more money. We can hire more officers. We can get better equipment and do the things that need to be done here, and still not have to ask for any more money.
Right.
I mean, it's because the money's there. It's just how it's being used
or misappropriated.
Yeah, that and I'll turn. I know Todd knows some stuff there, so I'll turn it back over to him. But trust me, the money we're finding, that can be used, and that's taken, for other positions, it's moved to other county departments. It's pretty significant.
So those misappropriation of funds, let's unpack that a little bit, because I'm sure there's plenty of folks listening to this that are going to be like, what? Those officers that are exempt from getting those overtime shifts, those off-duty shifts that pay more, it sounds to me like the department's being run like a family business, and there's nepotism, even though they may not be related by blood and DNA. There's a friendship there that's like, hey, I know you're not, necessarily per union rules, allowed to take this, this side gig, this overtime. You're exempt from it, but I'm going to let you have this extra 20 or 30 grand, in 6 months, I believe it was, or quarterly. Okay. That's a lot of money, quarterly, extra money, 20, 30 grand. I mean, that's a good side hustle. And that's supposed to go to patrol officers, I would imagine, and not necessarily administration.
Well, a long time ago, I mean, I've been gone for a long time. I did other things, but there was actually an officer that got pushed out, got pretty much fired for just bringing this up. And I was kind of in the middle. And again, it was a long time ago, but I see that there's administrators that are still working union shifts. And that's what they were called, union shifts,
right?
Extra shifts. And they were for union members only. And anybody who brought that up was basically crucified. And that person ended up leaving and doing something else because he got pushed out. He was actually suspended, and he was on paid leave for like 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Paid leave. Yeah.
Wow. So can you explain to the folks listening that don't really understand the process why administrators and elected officials aren't part of the union?
I believe in federal law, they're exempt employees. So once you get promoted,
mm-hmm.
and it's not everywhere, because there's some places where you just get promoted based off of time, and then you still have union representation. In Butte, you don't have union representation after you become a captain or higher.
Mm-hmm.
So the captains, the undersheriff, and the sheriff aren't in the union. They're considered administrators.
Right.
And so by law, actually, they're exempt employees. And I'm sure I'm going to piss a lot of people off, but the fact of the matter is that they're taking shifts away from union members and new guys who are making, whatever it is now, $35,000, $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is still to this day, I don't have anything to prove it, but I see them working extra shifts. And my understanding is that you can get comp time and you can get overtime as administrator, which by federal law, you're supposed to be exempt. I think you can get comp time straight, but you're not to be compensated at time and a half for comp time or for overtime. My understanding is they take they're on call for a week, and then they get compensated for however much. I'm not really sure what the numbers are on it, but I know for a fact that they had cashed out every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Like each person can cash out, their comp time in a quarter, and it was, $15,000, $20,000. You compute that times, 6 administrators, and you're taking those shifts away from union employees. I mean, Butte's a strong union town, and I think it's wrong to take that away from it's a morale issue. I'm taking it away from my employees. I'm giving it to administrators who are supposed to be exempt from this. And then we're taking money out of the budget every quarter for our own personal gain. When we could be using that for training or other, there's really no training there to speak of. But they could be using it for other things, basically.
Was there, I know now that training's an issue. Did you guys do a lot of training when you were there, or?
Some. Basically, you didn't get a lot. If you're on SWAT, you could get a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, people think this is ridiculous because, coming from different background and doing other things, you used to have a rule where you would get 50 rounds of ammunition
mm-hmm.
every other month. And then to get that 50 rounds, you'd have to bring back your brass. to get the other 50 rounds. And I'm like, well, why can't we just, wait 2 or 3 months and not stockpile them? I'm like, well, I'm not getting no training value, getting in my vehicle, driving all the way out to the range, opening up the gate, setting up targets, shooting 50 rounds, picking up my brass, and I'm getting no training value out of that. So I'd like to have 200, 300, 1,000 rounds to do something adequate.
I like
that's
that.
A kind of training.
Here's my 50 empties. Can I get a refill?
That's ridiculous. People don't,
That's ridiculous. Whose policy was that? Who came up with that?
I don't know.
Was that under the current administration's rule, or was that the rule?
They could still be doing it for all I know, but it was.
That was when
probably it was. I mean, it was when I was here. So Lester was like a sergeant or lieutenant.
So that's been kind of a training's been a
They
little.
could still be doing it. I don't know.
Lax for a while.
Came home a few times and told me some of the things they were doing in training, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't really want to get into it, but I'm like, if that's the way you're doing it, I want to make some changes.
To go off on a little mini rabbit trail here, because it's noteworthy and slightly sad and comical at the same time. There's how many patrol officers at that time?
I think there was 70, maybe.
70?
Sure. In the whole department. The patrol officers, I don't know, probably like 35 or 40.
Wow. And how many are there today?
We're not, the number changes because you have.
Yeah, it's a revolving door.
Yeah.
But speculation, how many do you think are there right now? Last total? Officers, patrol officers, not.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
I'd say you're probably sitting there somewhere. If you're full duty, you're probably sitting there in the 30s. If you're fully staffed for patrol. Yeah.
So it's gone down a little bit. 9mm is the caliber that's carried by the officers, right?
40.
40. Okay.
They have 9mm. They've got the new guns are in.
Okay.
And they've been in for months, and they don't have the red dot
reflex
for them yet. I guess those haven't arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they haven't been to the range to shoot for over a year, is because they're waiting to go qualify with their new weapons. Once the parts for their new weapons come in, then they'll go qualify.
So even at 40 cal, 50 round box, they're buying that in bulk from an ammunition supplier, probably getting it in bulk less than $20 a box. That's not equating to $1 million in ammo for somebody to get 200 rounds to go to the range, but they will sling $1.5 million in your lawsuit to continue to kick the can down the road.
Right.
It's just the misappropriation of funds, and then the poor. I mean, I say it poor. It's worse than poor. It's like the most ridiculous, asinine leadership decisions that I probably have one of the top 5 I've ever heard.
Right.
Don't train. Don't go to the range. Here's 50 rounds. Bring me your refills. You're fired, even though you need help. Here's the union positions. Well, the union, officers who make 35 or 40 a year, which doesn't do jack shit for taking care of a family these days.
Right.
You're getting the big dogs that are in the clique sponging up those shifts. It's just a complete corrupt shit show is what it's working out to be on paper.
Right.
Absolutely 100%.
Oh, I agree.
And it's funny how your case is, you got to Google it to find Rhonda's case because it's not on the news like Mike said. There's no coverage.
I've tried to talk to him multiple times about putting out there to the public. That's one of the reasons I agreed to do this, because people don't understand like how ridiculous this is.
That's why we wanted you to do this, because this is your chance to tell your story and bring awareness to the people, the voters that need to know that this is.
Well, not only did she bring things
ridiculous
up to them at the end, after she filed her HR complaint, and I never really got into that, but she filed an HR complaint, and she's like, I was like, you got to follow through with it this time, because it's the only thing. At some point, they're going to realize you're serious. Because Rhonda's a nice person. I mean, she doesn't have a mean bone in her body. And so I told her, I was like, you got to follow through with this HR complaint this time, because otherwise it's just going to continue. And as soon as she did that, people started ignoring her. That's when she started getting things in her boxes. People wouldn't talk to her. Like, she'd walk into the office and everybody just go in their office and slam the doors. Nobody would include her in meetings. Like, they stopped doing the.
They ghosted her. Yeah.
She got the culture all the time. And, I can speak from this. Like, I used to get up in the mornings with her when I was home, and she'd be throwing up, crying. She's like, I don't know what to expect when I go into work today. I was like, that's not the environment. That's why you need to file an HR.
Well, it's a hostile work environment. That's a big no-no in today's world.
Right. And they still didn't even understand it. So they called in they have misinformation all the time, and they take bits and pieces out and they create their own narrative. So they brought a person from Great Falls.
Mhm.
And again, I keep using the word impartial because that's the word they use, and they're far from impartial. You can tell me if I'm wrong here, but they hired a person from Great Falls and said they're going to come in and we're going to do this impartial investigation for you. And so this lady comes in, she speaks to the administrator, the people who she's complaining against, she speaks to first. And then, she does somewhat of an investigation, I guess. So I keep saying like the word impartial. And the reason I say that is because this person's also hired by the county to do hostile work environment training. She's a contractor.
Mhm.
So I'm like, a reasonable person would assume that she's not going to side with Rhonda on this because she's hired by the county. She's not anyway impartial if she's hired by the county to do contract work to teach these classes.
Right.
Because if she doesn't side with the county, they're not going to hire her any longer. The contract will be gone. So
It's not very impartial then, is it?
right. And so this is what they have. And when she came in, she said both sides can work on some things. And what I recommend is you guys just communicate better, is what she said. So Rhonda tried that and things got worse and they got worse. So this is what kind of person she is. She's like, she was bawling one day going into work and she's like, you know what, I'm just going to kill him with kindness. She went out and bought a coffee pot and she bought like some coffee to go with it and hot chocolate and stuff. She's like, I'm going to go in early. I'm going to make coffee for people and try to be a better person. She also did it for her victims.
How'd that work out when she tried that at work?
Terrible. So I say that because it's a segue into the ridiculous things that they're bringing up about her. So she gets this coffee pot, didn't work. And she's like, well, I'll use it for my victims and stuff too, get hot chocolate and different things so they're comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then prior to this, like this is a couple of years before that, the undersheriff asked her to, and this is going to sound ridiculous again, but he asked her to carve a pumpkin because Rhonda's big into decorating. She does home interior stuff. And so he gets her a pumpkin, I don't know, all the stuff, a nightstick, a badge or whatever, and he wants her to enter this contest. So she's like, I'll do it on my lunch hour. So she carves the pumpkin, does all these things, doesn't think anything of it. So after she files her HR complaint, all of a sudden this carving the pumpkin's an issue. All of a sudden her having a coffee pot is an issue. I'm like, are those policy violations? Are they crimes? Like, what? It's ridiculous.
I kind of have to ask, how do you make an issue out of carving a pumpkin?
She could have been doing other useful things on her time.
Nice. It was her lunch. It was her lunchtime, though, right?
It actually makes me sick to my stomach because, like, our union attorney's like, why are we still talking about carving a pumpkin? So I heard it all through arbitration. I heard it through the vacate. I'm sure I'm going to hear it in Supreme Court. This is their pushback to why they fired her, carving a pumpkin and having a coffee pot in her office. And they spoke about it for 15 minutes in the federal trial. Like, you're wasting everybody's time. This is what she did. It's this act that you terminated her for. She carved a pumpkin and she brought a coffee pot in to try to be the better person with everybody. And that's what you're bringing to trial to refute what you did.
Well, I mean, attorneys go to a lot of schooling and a lot of training to learn how to spin bullshit, right? So if that's going to be their platform of she's kicking, she's sandbagging her daily duties by carving a pumpkin that they asked her to, and she's making coffee in her office instead of going out and solving crimes.
Right. But the thing is the undersheriff at the time who gave it to her, he admitted in his deposition and in court. I'm like, this is what you're taking to court. Like, that you should be embarrassed.
Well,
that's why I always thought this would be settled to begin with. Because
that's almost laughable.
If you're going to trial or an arbitration with her carving a pumpkin and the coffee pot, and then I'll also address this because it's come up, is people are like, well, she got fired for losing her case files. And I'm going to touch on that for a little bit because I think it's important because it's misinformation again.
Sure.
And the people that are going to keep pushing this, if they're listening, I'm going to do defamation slander after all this if it affects her anyway.
Fire away. Let's hear about it.
So basically what the actual events that happened there was the department was going from paper files to electronic files. And she had all these, she's kind of a clean freak too, but she's got all these files in her office. And so she's like, well, since we're moving to electronic files, people were taking them and moving them to the other evidence room. And the county likes to say, well, she just threw them in the basement. And I keep hearing this over and over. So everybody's clear the basement is also an evidence room. They use it for drying, for drugs. They take overflow cases down there. It's a locked, certified evidence room.
Yeah,
so
I've heard
when they
that's
keep
quite
saying
the
that she
museum
threw them in
piece.
the basement, discarded them in the basement, I heard this over and over too. And they also brought this up in trial. The actual events where they were converting again, like I said, to electronic case files and she was told by the evidence tech to take them down to the downstairs evidence room. So she took them down there, labeled them, had her name on it. Didn't think anything of it. A few months later, she needed a thumb drive or something that wasn't an electronic file to investigate the case further. She goes downstairs, her cases are gone. All the boxes. She looks all over the evidence room, can't find it anywhere. Says, like, this is weird. So she starts asking around. Everybody's like, nope, nope. Ask her captain, same guy. Hey, what happened to my case files? I have no idea. He tells her. So it turns out he had taken them, put them under his desk, and was going through them and putting sticky notes on each individual one. It's pretty much demeaning, really. Then tries to discipline her for losing her files. I'm like, she was told to put them there. You took them. And when she went to try to get some stuff out of it to investigate a case, you had them, and you told her you didn't. So these people that say that she was terminated for that are not only incorrect, because I have the termination letter, and the only reason she was terminated was for fitness for duty. But they want to put out this fodder, and they want to try to make it look as though she did all these other things. But the public doesn't know the fact that the only thing they have is she carved a pumpkin, had a coffee pot in her office, and she took files to where she was directed to, and they're trying to use that to make her look like a bad person. If anybody thinks he looks like a bad person because of that, I got some motion on property for you.
I think wasn't you probably have a recording of when I met with the police union originally that one of the detectives, I believe it was one of the detective sergeants, even brought that up to me that she was fired for hiding her case files. So that's originally what I was told about the case. Although from the department, when I spoke with the union, I obviously knew that wasn't true at the time, but yeah, so that's where so that is the story that they're spreading, and I know my union meeting with them was recorded as well, and I'm sure they've seen it and had a copy of it for a while. I don't know, but yeah, so that is true. That is how they're spreading while she was let go, and how that came up was I was speaking to the union members about retaliation in the department, and I brought up the case that they had just lost in federal court this administration had just lost the case in federal court against Rhonda, and they had been awarded this $349,000, and everybody in the room but one person agreed with what I said, and would agree that there is retaliation in the department, and these are things the officers face. And this one officer, sergeant, responded, well, I guess how he actually put it was, well, what would you do if there was a detective in your department that you found was hiding a couple hundred cases? And I didn't know at that time that's who he was referring to Rhonda as this. So I just assumed there was somebody in the department that was hiding cases, and I said, well, if somebody was actually doing that, then we have an issue.
Right.
Well, I didn't realize at the time he was speaking about, that's what he was trying to infer, that Rhonda was hiding files, but by hiding them, she was putting them where she was told to put them, in the evidence room. So,
right.
So they're still covering themselves. But again, I don't really hold anything against the officer that spoke up in that meeting. He was on his cell phone constantly, so we knew that he was being coached on what to say
during the meeting.
Yeah. So I'd see him look at his phone, and then all of a sudden he'd pipe up with something, and then I'd answer it, and then I'd look around the room at the other officers, and I could see him out of the corner, and I'd text him a response, and he'd have another question for me. So I knew it was coming from the upper administration at that time as well.
Well, obviously, these are all retaliatory tactics that they're using. I mean, here's the deal. I mean, if you think about the fact that she was accused of hiding case files, but not until they were going to. So that didn't happen until.
That was 2018. She was fired in 2000. None of those things were an issue until she files an HR complaint. Now all of a sudden everything becomes an issue.
So then went back to that one. So here's the deal: is those accusations didn't occur until after they were going to digitize the files. They were moving them for that.
They brought up some other things too, and people can listen to actually what happened instead of their version. But she has a locked office, and she's had people, she had a federal agent, people going through her office all the time. Why are they going to your locked office? And they spend a lot of time in there. She's like, I don't know. Then the thumb drives and stuff, when she was documenting things, they turned up missing. And then once she files this complaint, she goes to do taser training, and she's a detective, so she doesn't carry a taser.
Mm-hmm.
She has her police belt in her office, and she put her taser up on the refrigerator, and she kept her pistol belt down by the floor. And she goes to do taser training, and her taser's gone. This all, of course, after she complains.
Right.
And so she's like, I always put it right there. I only use it once a year, and it's unless I do an extra duty shift or something. And she's like, what do you think happened? I was like, they took it. Like, it was brought up in trial. Of course, everybody denies it, but to have access to your office, you put it in the same place, and now it's gone. So she goes to the undersheriff, who's the taser person, and he's like, oh, I probably took it. He's like, I change them out all the time. Don't worry about it. It was me. And then, of course, this is
and then all of a sudden he denied it.
Now all of a sudden, now we're having an issue.
Well, I mean, she didn't lose quote unquote case files or hide them prior to them wanting to digitize them.
Right.
That was just a convenient time to blame that. I think if she had a history of that happening in the past, then there would be some merit there.
Right.
But if she doesn't, and it didn't occur when they were still using paper, when they were going to go paperless, and they were transitioning the files to the basement, then all of a sudden they have a way of trying to spin the narrative that you're hiding case files.
Well, they really tried to. I mean, there was so many things. Like, she had the oldest computer back there. She's the oldest, not oldest, but the most veteran detective back there.
Yeah.
And she was having to take her reports,
Mm-hmm.
cut and paste, page by page, put it on a Word because they didn't have spell check, and then go back and forth with it. And they're like, why is it taking so long? She's like, I have the oldest computer, and then you yell at me for not getting them done in a timely manner yet. I don't have a system. Everybody else has a good system.
Right.
Little things like that, and they use that against her because then they started complaining about, well, she didn't do this right or that right, even though they know the reason why.
So I wonder how much tax dollars were wasted on arguing the pumpkin carving, the coffee pot.
I bet I've heard it 40
and
times.
case file. Yeah, I mean they probably spent a fortune on just those baseless claims.
Well, then the other thing that they brought up was, and I'll put it out there because she has nothing to hide, was her pistol. They said it was unusable and unfunctional because it had a melt mark on it. So this is the other thing they brought up, and I'm like, okay. So she brings it. She had it all, and there's this little teeny tiny melt mark in it. We still don't know what it's from, but she had this space heater in her office because it's cold all the time. And she puts her pistol belt down there. So I assume that it probably touched a little bit. And we got pictures of it. So they made this into an issue again down the road, like a trial when we filed a lawsuit.
Right.
And they're like, well, it was unusable, it was unserviceable. And, she caused damage to her weapon and so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, first of all, it is functional. And the firearms instructor, the armorer that, because he was going through all the weapons and checking them and cleaning them and do whatever they do, he gave it back to her. Nobody ever took a picture of it except for
so he serviced the weapon and gave it back to her with the melt mark.
So if it's unserviceable,
you
can't use it on duty, why'd you give it back?
Right.
And why didn't, if it's such a big deal, why'd you send it back to the company and get a new one instead of putting in evidence? Or why didn't you take pictures of it?
Right.
Because it wasn't that, it was a minute detail, and they tried to make it into something that it wasn't.
Well, I mean, it just adds to the pile of BS that administration, builds daily. It sounds to me like, so you got all this, your case isn't heard on the news. I mean, hardly ever. You got to search for it. The administration does not make public the crime statistics. We've covered that. And, they do all this click, and they basically seem like they go to great lengths to not let the public know the truth.
Right.
From the expenses on this trial that's been going on for 4 years. They should have just ended within the first year with a settlement and went their separate ways. If they didn't want her there, and regardless of how their tactics were, which doesn't make it right, but at that point, if she was willing to part ways and they were wanting her to go, make a settlement. Don't drag it out. This is not a super wealthy county. These people work hard here. Our friends and neighbors, that live in our community, they work hard here. The taxes shouldn't be used as, like getting a new credit card. We have a vendetta. Let's spend all this money that we don't have on bullshit. And they keep the people, in the dark on it. I mean, it's truly like mushroom management, keep them in the dark and feed them bullshit. And, that has to change, and everybody's getting a chance to change that. Good news is November 5th, you can get Mike Gage in there and watch how fast it goes from a cliquey, corrupt nightmare to a proper law enforcement agency where people get what they pay for in their taxes.
Absolutely. We'll make those changes again, and they'll happen quickly, and we'll change the morale of the department, and let the officers again do their jobs, be officers. If they're going to be able to arrest people, they're going to be able to
protect the public.
And if somebody needs to go to jail, we'll have room in the jail for those people. And a lot of things need to change, and my administration is ready. We know what needs to be done, and we'll make those changes on day one. It's not going to be something that's I'm going to say, well, you're going to have to give me a year or two to make these changes. It's not true. We can do it immediately. We can change the morale on day one, and we'll get this taken care of. We'll get it straightened out, and we'll get it straightened out quickly. And again, these guys that are wearing the uniform every day deserve a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And like I told the union, when it comes to these collective bargaining things, we're going to be sitting on the same side of the table. I'll be going to the county with you guys saying, my guys need a raise, my guys need this. We need, when it comes to budgeting, it's going to be for the training that the officers need, the equipment that the officers need. And, there's a lot of things that need to be done. We got this new computer system that they brag about, we're in the 21st century, blah, blah, blah. The computer system doesn't work. Half the time they don't have connectivity. I've sat in patrol cars, they're supposed to be GPS, show where the other officers are on the map, show the addresses on the map. None of that works, so there's a lot of things that we need to do. I know if you hit if the officer has a emergency button on the radio, the GPS should light up, should tell you who the officer is, where the officer is.
Right.
That stuff doesn't work. It's not turned on. It'll say that. We'll just say that if it was me that Mike Gage has an emergency, but if I hit that button, they'll know it's me and I have an emergency. They have no idea where I am.
Right.
And that system's set up to pinpoint the address that I'm at, exactly where I'm at. It should show where all the patrol cars are at. It just doesn't work. It's never been set up correctly. So, they have the capability. They just don't turn it on. They don't use it. So, and it would make sense too, because dispatch should be able to see where all the officers are at. So if they get an emergency call and they see that, maybe an officer's patrolling out by, on the west end of town, and they get emergency call on the east end of town, they ought to be able to look at their map, see that there's an officer a block away,
right,
and dispatch that officer, as just opposed to throwing out the officer that's on the west end of town to respond all the way over to the east end of town to handle the call. And it's a flip of a switch. Those things, they need to be turned on, and it's an officer safety issue as well. So again, I know this has been a good week, and we've got rodeo duties to go to. I know we're volunteering this weekend at the rodeo, and I think if you haven't seen it, I got to walk in the VIP booth or the VIP room yesterday. Couldn't believe it. They were all bragging about, you got to come see this room. You got to come see this room. And I walked in there and I'm like, wow. And I said, who did this decoration?
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea. I had no clue. And they're like, oh, Rhonda did it. I go, who's Rhonda? And they're like, Rhonda Staton, the old police officer. And I'm like, of course I had no idea, but when you see it today, you're going to be pretty impressed with how she set up that room. And yeah, it's impressive. So, if you get a chance to walk in the VIP room, you're going to be pretty impressed with what they've got set up for the rodeo. And, remember that, come out, bring the family, bring the friends. There are several contestants who are entered in the rodeo that do qualify every year for the National Finals Rodeo. So I know we've got local steer wrestler Ty Erickson from Helena, and he is a world champion. And then there's several barrel racers as well that qualify for the NFR Finals in Las Vegas every year. So it'll be a good time. A big shout out to Ashley Massard, who's pretty much spearheaded getting everything taken care of, and all our volunteers. And if you've got some extra time, I do know they need some more volunteers to help this weekend. So get down there, get online. You can look up what spots they have available.
Yeah. Yeah, no, get out there, enjoy the rodeo. It's the first one in 13 years, I think, right?
13 years. And, I read, you got the same article I did, that the Butte Rodeo used to be compared to Cheyenne Frontier Days and the Pendleton Roundup. So that was in the 1930s and 1940s. So this was one of the biggest rodeos in the United States for many years. And, it's going to take a little time, but we sure like to get it back to that and get all the top quality athletes in here to compete each year. So I think we're on the right track, and this is going to be a fun time. And again, Todd, thank you for volunteering and getting Rhonda's story out there. I know that, again, it was an eye-opener for me. I've heard some of it before. A lot of what you said today was new to me. And again, this is I inviting people on. So I'm not sitting here telling you what's going on, and you're just hearing it that I have some political vendetta against the current sheriff, because I don't. I don't know him. I'm just going off of what the current officers tell me, what past officers tell me. And so, again, it's better for you to hear it from them. It's not coming from me. They're here at their own free will telling you what's going on and the truth behind what I've said in the past. So, Todd, again, thank you, sir. We appreciate you coming on. And I know this wasn't the easiest thing for you to do. I know it strikes it's hard to talk about. I know how it's affected you and your family and Rhonda, and so appreciate you coming in here and telling us the other side of the story.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate inviting me and all the support for Rhonda and I. With that, I know you don't know Ed Lester, and I do. I actually worked with him for a long time on the SWAT team with him, and he was a really good guy. And to be honest with you, the decisions that you're making now are poor. And I hope I presented that well. I kind of started off, I've never done a podcast before, so I kind of started off mumbling and mumbled my way through it. I appreciate your time.
You did great, man.
But I guess what I'm saying is I did work for him before, and I voted for him, and I will no longer do that just based off he's a poor leader now. I don't know what changed in him, but he's not the person that he used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I do support you, and I think he'll change. And so I guess my last words are vote for Mike Gage.
Well said.
Thank you, Todd. We certainly appreciate that, and we're hearing that more and more every day. So, we're heading in the right direction again, and we're just sitting out there letting the community know, our officers are important to us, and we're going to put them as top priority going forward. And, I remember when Ron Davis was interviewing me, he's like, so you're going to be the cop's cop leader, and I said, absolutely. And that's what's needed here. Some people may disagree, but right now this department, the morale is so bad in this department. They need somebody who's going to come up, that's going to have the officers back, that the officers know that when they have to make a decision in a split second, that we're going to be there for them. And right now they have to decide, should I do this? Should I not do this? Am I going to get fired if I do this? They don't have time to sit there and think about that. They have to make split second decisions and know that, if you do the right thing for the right reasons, we're going to have your back. And with that, I'm done for this week. So
yeah, I mean, these officers deserve better leadership. You'll get that with you. We're confident of that. And, I know change isn't easy. Change is scary, especially when you're used to a certain way of life in a town. But sometimes, because through bad leadership and choices, change is the only way.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have here. So thank you, Todd, for being here and telling Rhonda's story. I hope that all of you listening and all the folks in town really get behind the Staton family and start supporting them, because they need the support. Whether you agree with one side or the other, nobody deserves to be railroaded in their career. And you certainly don't deserve to be abandoned in a dark time in your career when you obtain scars from the career.
Correct.
That's not right. It's about right and wrong. It's not about necessarily specific opinions. And this wasn't right. It wasn't right to spend all the tax dollars that they have on this case for 4 years. And it continues. Realize that there's more to come. So there's going to be more tax dollars spent. That doesn't make it right either. So you definitely have our support. I hope the community gets behind your family. And thank you for coming today. We really appreciate
Thank
your story and Rhonda's story. Mike, episode 7 in the books.
There we go.
So everybody tune in and listen. Have a great weekend. A safe Friday. Go see the rodeo. Support the town. This is Montana, for God's sakes. It's a rodeo country. So everybody get out there and get in there and watch it and support it.
Absolutely. If you see me, come up and say hi. You know, I'd love to get to know you if I haven't met you yet. So I'll be out there all 3 days and look for. And Sunday morning, we're having the Cowboy Church out there for the rodeo contestants and anybody that wants to join. I believe that starts at 8. Or the kind of meet and greet stuff, and then the 8:30 service starts at 8:30. They do have food out there, food and coffee. So come on out and see how the Cowboy Church works. It'll be out there Sunday morning.
Sounds great. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.